The jinx has been lifted. The Toronto Maple Leafs have won a playoff series for the first time in too long. David Morassutti of Locked On Leafs is here to talk about how they got the job done and what it means going forward for the Leafs. All that and more coming up on the road to the Stanley Cup. Gil Martin here. The Locked On Road to the Stanley Cup continues as we welcome David Morassutti from Locked On Leafs to talk about the Leafs' big round one victory over the Tampa Bay Lightning and to discuss their prospects as they head into round two. And David, what was the biggest reason that the Leafs were finally able to overcome this long playoff drought?
They stuck to it. As simple as that, they had a lot of nervous moments. You could tell they were nervous for a good part of this game, but they just stuck to it. They didn't let the moment get too big for them, right? And it's a really tough thing to do when you have to win 3 overtime games on the road in a series. But they just find a way, even if they're not playing at their best, just find their way. And I think that's really what it was. Is they're big stars, the players that they spend a lot of money on, that everyone talks about, they spend a lot of money on, were the ones that came through in the big game. And I think that's been ultimately the difference between this year and the many years prior to that.
So you talked about the big guys, the high paid guys, the stars coming through, but who was the Maple Leafs series MVP and why?
I got to give it to Auston Matthews. The Leafs would not have been in this situation, I don't think, if it wasn't for Auston Matthews. Down 4-1, Tampa's looking to try to go back to Toronto and improve their chances to win the series. Auston Matthews scores 2 massive goals to get the Leafs back into the game, staging that comeback for the Leafs to eventually win in overtime. So, yeah, I think you got to give it to Auston Matthews. He's This is the moment that we've been waiting for Auston Matthews to come up in these games. In game number 6, he's the one that scores the first goal. He kept sticking with it. Yeah, sure, there was probably moments where he hasn't looked like Auston Matthews, but he is paid to score goals, and that's exactly what he did in this series.
Was there a potential weakness that got exposed against Tampa Bay that needs to be addressed before they take on the winner of the Boston-Florida series?
I think it's the way that they've been playing their defensive end, right? Like, too many times they've been unable to clear the puck, clean breakouts. That's been such a struggle for this Leafs team, and Tampa found ways to extend shifts, get guys tired, making brutal mistakes, turnovers, and also dealing with Tampa's speed was a big problem for the Leafs, especially with their defensemen not able to really keep up with the pace. So the Leafs got to do a lot better job in the neutral zone, slowing down their opponent. And in the defensive end, just trying to get to those loose pucks, winning those battles, and really try to establish more possession in the offensive zone. That's what the Leafs have been all about: possession in the offensive zone, creating as many chances. So those big goal scorers, those game breakers, get as many opportunities as they can. You look at the overtime winner for John Tavares. It happened because they found ways to keep that puck into the zone. He was able to then, use his strength on the puck to keep the possession going and eventually find a way to get a puck on net. And, when you get the puck on net in a lot of situations with traffic, good things generally happen.
So how important was it for this team to finally win a series and get this monkey off their backs?
You know what? They talk a lot about like the city and the fan base needing it. But I just think also the players needed it. The ones that have been here since, Auston Matthews and Mitch Marner, Nylander, Riley. You think of all those guys that have been through all the heartbreaking losses in the playoffs. They needed it for themselves to know that they can actually do it. And I think that's the biggest one there is, so much talk about if they don't win, who's getting traded. Sheldon Keefe likely doesn't return. Kyle Dubas likely doesn't return. Just that negative talk and just saying that can happen, that's on the radar. The Leafs needed to make that narrative go away as much as possible. Now, that narrative is going to stick around. Obviously, one round is not what this team has aspired to. It's now to go as far as possible. And we keep saying that this one, if they get around, watch out. This is a team that if they get that confidence behind them, they can really push forward. And now they get a little bit of time to reset, right? Now they don't have to. They are now waiting for their next opponent, and that gives them a chance to reset and refocus because, yeah, they really do feel good right now. Now they got to have that. Their mindset needs to change again and say, look how much it took us to get through one round. We got to be able to do this for a lot more than just one round.
What do you think it would take to make this playoff run to be considered a success for the Maple Leafs? One more round, the conference final, or do they really have to win a cup?
I think, honestly, a minimum you have to get to the Eastern Conference Finals, but really getting to the Cup final. I know that everyone's going to aspire to say they got to win the Stanley Cup. That's really hard to do. Getting to the Cup final would be like, that's something the Leafs have not been able to do since 1967 is to get to the Stanley Cup final. They've been to the conference final. It's been a little while since they've been to the conference final, so that alone is a very big accomplishment. But just getting to the Cup final would be a huge achievement for this team. And yeah, obviously there is the desire of this team to win the Cup because that's what this has all been leading towards. But getting to that Cup final, I think it gets rid of a lot of that bad voodoo that's been around this city for a really, really long time.
Well, David, want to thank you very much. That does it for our Leafs round 1 review and round 2 look ahead here on the Locked On Road to the Stanley Cup. Be sure to subscribe or follow Locked On Leafs for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. The Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.